They whispered before she ever learned how to walk. Some said it was a bad omen. Others said it was a curse sent by the gods themselves. In the small kingdom of Lyrian, people believed signs on the body meant signs of the soul. And the mark on her skin was something they had never seen before. A deep, moon-shaped birthmark spread across the side of her neck, dark and impossible to hide. From the day she was born, the villagers decided her fate without ever knowing her name. Her mother held her close and cried that night, not because the child was unhealthy, but because she knew how cruel the world could be. The midwife had gone silent when she saw the mark. The room that was once filled with joy suddenly felt cold. Someone muttered the word cursed, and it spread like fire. By sunrise, everyone in the village knew about the baby with the strange birthmark. They named her Alara, but most people never used her name. To them she was just the marked girl. As Alara grew older, she learned to keep her head down. Children avoided her. Parents pulled their sons and daughters away when she walked past. Some nights, stones hit the walls of her small home, thrown by people who were afraid of what they did not understand. Alara never knew why her mark made them so angry. She only knew that it made her alone. The birthmark never hurt her. It didn't glow or burn or give her strange powers like the stories claimed. It was simply there, part of her, as natural as her heartbeat. But in Lyrian, stories mattered more than truth. Old legends spoke of a child born with a shadow on her skin, a sign of ruin for the royal bloodline. No one remembered where the story came from, but everyone believed it. Far away from Alara's village, beyond the stone bridges and golden fields, stood the royal palace. This was where Prince Rowan lived. He was known across the kingdom for being different. While other royals chased glory and praise, Rowan listened. He asked questions. He spent more time in the palace library than at banquets. The people admired him, but they also found him strange. A prince who thought too much was often more dangerous than one who did not think at all. Rowan had grown tired of hearing the same praises and lies. Everyone bowed, everyone smiled, but no one spoke honestly around him. That was why, on one quiet morning, he disguised himself as a traveler and left the palace without telling anyone. He wanted to see his kingdom as it truly was, not through painted windows and guarded halls. Alara was 16 when their paths almost crossed for the first time. She was at the village well, filling a cracked clay jug with water. Her hair was tied back loosely, but the birthmark was visible as always. A group of villagers stood nearby, whispering and staring. Alara pretended not to notice, though her hands trembled slightly. She had learned long ago that reacting only made things worse. Prince Rowan, dusty from the road and dressed like a commoner, watched from a distance. He noticed the way people looked at her, the fear mixed with curiosity. He noticed how she stood straight despite it all. Something about her quiet strength made him pause. He asked a passing merchant who she was. The merchant scoffed. That one? Best stay away. Bad luck follows her. Rowan frowned. Bad luck how? The man leaned closer, lowering his voice. She was born with the mark. They say it means death for kings. Rowan didn't respond, but the words stayed with him. Death for kings. He had heard many legends in his life, but he had never seen one with a human face. As he watched Alara walk away with her water jug, he felt something he couldn't explain. Not fear. Not curiosity alone. It was a pull, like a question that demanded an answer. Alara felt eyes on her and turned briefly. For a moment her gaze met Rowan's. He looked away quickly, but that single second stayed with her. His eyes were kind, not filled with the usual judgment or fear. It unsettled her more than the whispers ever had. That night, Alara sat by her small window, tracing the edge of her birthmark with her fingers. She often wondered what her life would be like without it. Would people smile at her? Would doors open instead of closing? She had stopped dreaming of love long ago. In Lyrian, no one wanted a cursed girl. Back at the palace, Rowan returned with a troubled mind. He couldn't forget the girl by the well. The way the kingdom he loved could be so cruel. The way a single mark could turn a person into a monster in the eyes of many. Against his better judgment, he ordered his advisors to bring him every old record, every forgotten story about the legend of the marked child. What he read disturbed him. The stories were vague, twisted by time. Some said the marked one would destroy the crown. Others claimed she would change it forever. No one agreed on the ending. But one line appeared again and again, hidden between fear-filled words. The mark is not a curse, but a choice. Rowan closed the book, his heart racing. If the legends were wrong, then the kingdom had been wrong about Alara all along. And if they were right, then meeting her could change everything. The next morning, a royal decree was sent out. The prince would be visiting nearby villages to hear the concerns of the people. Panic spread through Alara's village. People worried that her presence alone would bring disaster. Some even suggested hiding her away until the prince left. Alara overheard the whispers and felt the familiar knot of fear tighten in her chest. She had no idea that the prince was already thinking about her. She didn't know that her life was standing on the edge of something far bigger than her village, bigger than her mark, bigger than the stories told about her. As the royal procession approached, Alara stood at the edge of the crowd, heart pounding, unaware that the prince she had briefly locked eyes with was about to see her again. And this time he would not look away. The crowd shifted as the royal horses came into view, their hooves striking the dirt road with slow authority. Banners bearing the crest of Lyrian fluttered in the breeze, and people bowed their heads as the procession passed. Alara stayed still, half hidden behind taller villagers, her fingers clenched tightly around the edge of her worn cloak. She had learned how to make herself small, how to disappear even while standing in plain sight. Prince Rowan rode at the front, his posture calm, his eyes alert. He scanned the faces before him, not looking for praise but for truth. He saw fear, excitement, hope, and greed. Then, through a gap in the crowd, he saw her again. The same girl from the well. The same birthmark, uncovered, unashamed. This time she did not look away. For a brief moment, the noise faded. Rowan felt the weight of every story he had read pressing against his chest. The cursed girl. The marked child. The one everyone feared. Yet the girl standing there looked nothing like a monster. She looked tired, guarded, human. Alara's heart raced when she realized who he was. The traveler from before wasn't just anyone. He was the prince. Her first instinct was to step back, to hide, but her feet refused to move. Something told her that running now would only confirm everything people believed about her. Rowan dismounted and raised a hand, signaling for silence. The villagers quieted at once. He spoke warmly, asking about their harvests, their concerns, their needs. People rushed to answer, eager to be seen, to be heard. Alara listened quietly, expecting nothing. She had never been asked anything in her life by anyone who mattered. Then Rowan's gaze returned to her. "You," he said gently. "What is your name?" The crowd froze. Alara felt dozens of eyes turn toward her. Her throat tightened. No one had ever asked her that in front of others. "Alara," she replied softly. A murmur rippled through the villagers. Some shook their heads. Others looked nervous. Rowan noticed it all. "And what do you wish for, Alara?" he asked. She hesitated. Years of silence pressed against her words. "I wish," she said slowly, "to live without being feared." The honesty in her voice struck Rowan harder than any rehearsed plea. He nodded, as if committing her words to memory. Before anyone could speak again, he turned back to his guards and announced that he would be staying in the area for several days to hear more from the people. As the procession moved on, tension followed like a shadow. Alara could feel it in the air. Some villagers glared at her, blaming her for the prince's interest. Others looked afraid, as though her words alone had tempted fate. That night, the village buzzed with rumors. Some claimed the prince had come because of Alara. Others insisted disaster would follow. Alara sat inside her small home, her mother pacing back and forth. "You should not have spoken," her mother whispered, fear thick in her voice. "You know how they think." "I know," Alara said quietly. But he asked. Outside the village, Rowan sat alone by a campfire, staring into the flames. His advisor, an older man named Ser Caldus, approached cautiously. "You shouldn't involve yourself with her, Your Highness," he said. "The legend." "I know the legend," Rowan replied, not looking up. "I also know how easily legends are twisted." Caldus sighed. "People believe the birthmark means ruin. If they think you favor her, then perhaps it is time they question why," Rowan interrupted. Still doubt lingered. Rowan was not blind to the danger. The royal court was already fragile, filled with nobles who feared change. Associating himself with a so-called cursed girl could spark unrest. Yet every instinct told him there was more to Alara's story than fear and superstition. Over the next few days, Rowan made excuses to pass near Alara's village. Sometimes he saw her helping her mother, sometimes gathering herbs near the forest's edge. She never begged, never tried to draw attention. That, more than anything, unsettled him. If she truly sought power or harm, wouldn't she act differently? Alara noticed him too. Each glimpse of the prince filled her with confusion. She had spent her life avoiding notice, yet now the most powerful man in the kingdom seemed unable to look away. Part of her feared his interest would only make things worse. Another part, one she barely recognized, felt something like hope. One evening, as Alara walked home alone, she sensed footsteps behind her. Her heart jumped, memories of cruel jokes and thrown stones flooding back. She turned sharply, ready to defend herself. It was Rowan, unguarded and unarmed. "I didn't mean to frighten you," he said quickly. "I just wanted to talk." Ilara stared at him, unsure whether to bow, run, or speak. "About what?" she asked. "About you," Rowan replied honestly. "About your birthmark. About the stories." Her expression hardened. "They are just stories," she said. "They don't know me." "That's why I want to," Rowan said. Ilara laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "Knowing me won't change what they believe." "Maybe not," Rowan said. "But it might change what I believe." The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken risks. Ilara had learned long ago that trusting others came at a cost. Yet something in his voice felt real. Not curious like a spectator. Not fearful like the others. Before she could respond, distant voices echoed from the village. Rowan stepped back. "I won't keep you," he said. "But I hope we can speak again." As he walked away, Ilara felt her world shifting in ways she didn't understand. She didn't know that unseen eyes were already watching. That word of the prince's interest had reached ears far beyond the village. That in the palace, powerful figures were growing uneasy. That same night, an old woman knocked quietly on Ilara's door. Her back was bent with age, her eyes sharp despite the years. "The mark you bear," she whispered, "it is older than this kingdom, and the prince should not be near you." Ilara's breath caught. "Why?" she asked. The woman leaned closer. "Because some choices wake sleeping things." Before Ilara could ask more, the woman vanished into the darkness, leaving only questions behind. And as Ilara closed the door, unaware of how deeply her fate was now tied to the crown, the birthmark on her neck felt heavier than ever, as if it were waiting for something to begin. The next morning the village felt different. Ilara sensed it the moment she stepped outside. Conversation stopped when she passed. Doors closed a little too quickly. The prince's brief words had stirred something dangerous. Fear had always followed her, but now it was mixed with anger. She kept her eyes forward as she walked toward the edge of the forest, where she often went to think. The old woman's warning echoed in her mind. Some choices wake sleeping things. Ilara didn't know what those words meant, but they wrapped around her thoughts like fog. She touched the birthmark on her neck, half expecting it to feel different. It didn't. It never did. From a shaded hill nearby, Prince Rowan watched the village through a spyglass. He had returned to the palace briefly the night before, only to be met with tense faces and forced smiles. News traveled fast, especially bad news. Several nobles had already requested private meetings. All of them spoke carefully, circling the same concern. "The people are uneasy, Your Highness," one had said. "Superstitions run deep." Another had been more direct. "The cursed girl brings risk to the crown." Rowan had listened without responding. He knew what they truly feared was not a curse but change. A story they could no longer control. That frightened them more than any birthmark ever could. Ser Caldas joined him on the hill. "You're being watched," the advisor warned quietly. "Not just by the villagers." Rowan lowered the glass. "I expected that." "What do you plan to do?" Caldas asked. Rowan hesitated. That was the question that haunted him. He didn't yet have an answer. He only knew that ignoring Ilara now would feel like betrayal. Not just of her, but of the truth he claimed to seek. In the village, a meeting was called without Ilara's knowledge. Several elders gathered in a narrow room, voices sharp with worry. "The prince's interest will bring trouble," one said. "If the court believes we shelter a curse. We should send her away," another suggested. "For everyone's safety." "But where?" someone asked. Silence followed. No one wanted to say it aloud. Ilara had nowhere to go. That evening, Ilara's mother noticed the tension too. "People are afraid," she said softly while preparing a thin meal. "They think you will bring punishment." Ilara swallowed. "I never asked for this." "I know," her mother replied, reaching for her hand. "But fear does not listen to reason." As night fell, Ilara returned to the forest, seeking quiet. The trees had always accepted her without question. As she walked deeper, she felt watched again, but not in the same way as before. This presence felt older. Heavier. She stopped when she heard a voice, low and unfamiliar. "You shouldn't be alone." A man stepped from behind a tree, dressed in dark travel clothes. He bowed slightly. "Forgive me. My name is Kale. I serve the crown." Ilara's heart pounded. "Why are you here?" "To protect the prince," Kale said, studying her carefully. "And to understand why he is risking so much for you." I didn't ask him to, Elara said quickly. Kale nodded. That may be true. But forces are moving now. Some want you hidden. Others want you gone. Elara felt cold spread through her chest. Gone? Kale didn't answer directly. Be careful who you trust, he said instead. Even kindness can have a cost. Before she could ask more, he disappeared into the trees, leaving Elara shaken and alone. Back at the palace, Queen Mother Althea stared at an old tapestry woven with faded symbols. She had ruled beside a king once, long before grief hardened her. She knew the legends better than anyone. She had lived through their consequences. They always return, she murmured. A servant hesitated at the doorway. Your Grace, the council requests your presence. She straightened slowly. They fear the marked girl, she said calmly. As they should. Not because she is dangerous but because she is a mirror. In the council chamber voices rose and fell. Some urged caution. Others demanded action. When Prince Rowan entered, silence fell like a blade. You are risking everything, one lord snapped. The people already whisper. Let them, Rowan replied evenly. Whispers can be answered. With what? Another demanded. A girl born under a bad sign? Rowan's eyes hardened. With truth. Something this kingdom has avoided for too long. The council exchanged uneasy glances. They could not openly oppose the prince, not yet. But seeds of resistance were already taking root. Meanwhile, Elara returned home to find her door slightly open. Inside nothing was stolen but something felt wrong. On the table lay a small object she had never seen before. A carved stone pendant, etched with the same moon shape as her birthmark. Her breath caught. She had seen that symbol before in old village carvings near the ruins. No one remembered what they meant. She picked it up, and for the first time in her life, the birthmark tingled faintly beneath her fingers. Not pain. Recognition. Far away, Prince Rowan felt an unexplained unease settle over him, as if an invisible thread had been pulled tight. That night, storms gathered over Lyrian. Thunder rolled across the sky, and rain lashed the palace windows. In the village, elders argued. In the forest, unseen eyes watched. In the palace, letters were written and sealed, carrying warnings and plans to distant allies. And in her small room, Elara stared at the pendant, realizing that her birthmark was not just a reason for fear. It was a question the kingdom had buried long ago. One that was now clawing its way back to the surface, threatening to unravel everything. She didn't yet know what choice lay ahead of her. Only that whatever was coming, it would not allow her to remain invisible any longer. The palace did not rest after that night. Even as torches burned low and dawn crept closer, a strange stillness hung in the air, the kind that comes before something breaks. Elara felt it as she walked through the quiet corridors, the echo of her steps sounding louder than they should have. The birthmark on her neck no longer glowed, yet it felt heavier, as if it were holding its breath. Outside her chamber, guards stood watch, their hands tight on their weapons. Protection again, wrapped in fear. Elara wondered how long it would take before the people decided she was dangerous once more. Legends did not die easily. They only waited. Prince Rowan had not slept. He stood at the window of the council tower, staring down at the city as the first bells of morning rang. Word of the night's chaos had not yet reached the streets, but it would. When it did, the truth would clash with old beliefs, and that collision worried him more than any armed rebellion. Ser Caldus entered quietly. The nobles are regrouping, he said. Some deny everything. Others claim the mark bewitched them. Rowan let out a slow breath. Of course they do. And the people? Caldus asked. They are watching, Rowan replied. Waiting to see who blinks first. Across the palace, Queen Mother Althea sat alone in the ancient chamber, her fingers resting on the cold stone floor. The glow had faded, but the memory of it still pressed against her chest. She had seen this once before, long ago, when she was younger and the kingdom was less honest. It's not finished, she whispered to herself. It never is. Elara was summoned to the great hall before midday. As she walked in, conversations died instantly. Eyes followed her every step. Some held awe. Others held suspicion. A few held quiet resentment. The birthmark was visible, no longer hidden by fear, and that alone made people uneasy. Rowan stood at the front, flanked by advisors. We will speak later, he said gently to Elara when she reached him. For now, listen. A noble stepped forward, bowing stiffly. Your Highness, the court demands clarity. The legends, the light, the disturbance in the palace. The disturbance, Rowan interrupted calmly, was caused by corruption, not a curse. Murmurs spread like ripples through water. Elara felt the tension rise, thick and sharp. She could sense it now, not as power but as awareness. People were standing at the edge of a choice, even if they didn't realize it yet. From the back of the hall, a voice called out, "If she is not cursed, then why her? Why the mark?" All eyes turned to Elara. She swallowed. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to speak. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I only know that fear gave it meaning. Not truth." Some shifted uncomfortably. Others scoffed. Truth was harder to accept than fear. As the court argued, Kale moved quietly through the outer halls. He slipped through servants' passages, listening, watching. He heard whispers of alliances forming again, quieter this time. Smarter. Fear had not vanished. It had only learned to hide. That afternoon, messengers arrived from distant provinces. Reports of unrest. Strange dreams. Symbols appearing in old places long forgotten. One message, sealed in black wax, was delivered directly to Queen Mother Althea. She read it once. Then again. Her hands trembled. In a far village near the eastern cliffs, a child had been born at sunrise. Marked. Althea closed her eyes. "Too soon," she murmured. As evening approached, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. Clouds gathered, heavy and low, mirroring the mood inside the palace. Elara stood alone on a balcony, the city spread out beneath her. She could feel the kingdom pulling at her from every direction, like hands asking, accusing, demanding. Rowan joined her quietly. "You don't have to stay," he said. "Once this settles." "It won't settle," Elara replied softly. "Not really." Rowan didn't argue. "I'm afraid," he admitted. "Not of you. Of what comes next." Elara looked at him. "So am I." The wind picked up suddenly, whipping her hair back. For a brief moment, the birthmark tingled again, faint but clear. She gasped softly. Rowan noticed. "What is it?" "I think," she said slowly, "that what happened before was only the door opening." Below them, bells began to ring again, louder this time. Not an alarm but a call. People gathered in the streets, drawn by rumors, by fear, by hope they didn't yet understand. From the shadows of the city, unseen eyes watched the palace lights. Plans were being adjusted. Stories rewritten. Elara closed her eyes, steadying herself as the weight of what was coming pressed down on her. The kingdom stood on the edge of something irreversible. And this time there would be no hiding, no silence, no turning back. Somewhere far away, a newborn cried under a darkening sky, the first sound of a future no one was ready for. And in the palace of Lyrian, every heartbeat seemed to count down toward a moment that would decide everything. Elara barely slept that night. The storm raged outside, but it was the pendant that kept her awake. It rested on the small wooden table beside her bed, catching flashes of lightning through the window. Each time thunder rolled, the symbol seemed darker, deeper, as if it held a memory she couldn't reach. She told herself it was only fear playing tricks on her, yet the faint tingling at her birthmark had not fully faded. At dawn, the village awoke to chaos. Royal guards stood at the main road, their armor glinting under the gray sky. Word spread quickly. A decree from the palace had arrived. Elara felt dread coil in her stomach even before she heard the details. She stepped outside just as the village elder read aloud. By order of the crown, the marked girl was to be brought to the palace for her own protection. Gasps followed. Some villagers looked relieved. Others looked terrified. Elara's mother gripped her arm, fear flashing across her face. "Protection?" she whispered. "Or imprisonment?" Elara didn't answer. She was still trying to understand how quickly her life was slipping out of her control. She looked toward the forest, half expecting the old woman or Kale to appear again. No one did. Prince Rowan stood near the guards, his expression unreadable. He had argued for the wording of the decree himself. Protection was the only way to justify bringing Elara to the palace without sparking open rebellion. But even as he watched her approach, he wondered if he had made things worse. "I didn't ask for this," Elara said quietly when she reached him. "I know," Rowan replied. "But the village is no longer safe for you. There are forces at work you don't see." She met his gaze. "Do you?" Rowan hesitated. "Not all of them." That honesty unsettled her more than false promises would have. Still, when the guard stepped forward, Elara nodded once. If her presence stirred danger, running would only spread it further. As the procession moved toward the palace, whispers followed them like a curse. Some villagers bowed. Others turned away. Elara felt the weight of every stare pressing against her back. Inside the palace walls, the tension was thick. Queen Mother Althea watched from a balcony as Alara arrived. The moment the girl stepped into the courtyard, Althea's breath caught. Not because of fear but recognition. The mark. The posture. The way the air itself seemed to settle around her. "So it begins," Althea murmured. Alara was given a small room, far from the grand halls but not quite a cell. Servants avoided her eyes. Guards lingered outside her door. Protection, she realized, could feel a lot like captivity. That evening, Rowan requested a private audience with his mother. Althea dismissed her attendants and studied her son carefully. "You are walking a dangerous path," she said. "So did you," Rowan replied. "Once." Althea smiled sadly. "And I paid the price." Rowan leaned forward. "You know something about the mark. About the legends. Don't you?" Silence stretched between them. Finally Althea spoke. "The stories were never meant for the people. They were warnings for the throne." She told him of an ancient pact, formed when the kingdom was young. A bloodline marked not to destroy the crown but to test it. When rulers became unjust, the marked ones appeared, forcing change. Sometimes through peace. Sometimes through loss. "And the pendant?" Rowan asked. Althea's eyes darkened. "A key. Or a seal. We were never certain." Meanwhile, Alara sat alone, turning the pendant over in her hands. The tingling returned, stronger now, pulsing softly against her skin. She stood and approached the mirror. For the first time, faint lines seemed to ripple around the birthmark, like shadows beneath water. A knock startled her. Cale stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You weren't supposed to receive that pendant yet," he said quietly. Alara's heart raced. "You know what it is?" "Yes," Cale replied. "And so do others. That's the problem." Before she could ask more, voices echoed in the corridor. Cale vanished through a hidden passage, leaving her shaken and full of questions. Later that night, far from Alara's room, a secret meeting took place. Several nobles gathered around a table lit by a single candle. Their faces were tense. "The prince is blinded," one said. "If the marked girl awakens the old power." "We won't let it come to that," another interrupted. "The story can end the way we choose." A sealed letter was passed across the table. An alliance was being formed, one that did not include the crown. Back in her room, Alara felt a sudden sharp pain at her neck. She gasped, clutching the birthmark as the pendant grew warm in her palm. Images flashed through her mind. A throne cracking. A crown falling. A prince standing alone. She dropped the pendant, breathing hard. Somewhere in the palace, Prince Rowan felt the same sudden weight settle in his chest. Neither of them knew who was moving against whom anymore. Only that the mark was no longer silent. And whatever it was meant to choose, it was waking up. The pain returned just before dawn, sharp enough to pull Alara from sleep. The birthmark burned now, no longer quiet or distant. She pressed her hand to her neck, trembling as voices echoed in the corridors outside her room. Not servants. Not guards. These footsteps were hurried, tense. Before she could reach the door, it opened. Prince Rowan stepped inside, his face pale. "You need to come with me," he said. "Now." "What's happening?" Alara asked. "The council has moved against us," Rowan replied. "They plan to end this tonight." As if summoned by his words, the palace bells rang out, low and urgent. Torches flared in the courtyard below. Alara felt the pendant grow warm again, almost alive in her hand. "They think killing me will stop whatever this is," she said quietly. Rowan met her gaze. "They're wrong." They moved through hidden passages, guided by Cale, who emerged from the shadows like he had been waiting. "The nobles have armed their supporters," he warned. "They plan to accuse the prince of treason by dawn." "And you?" Rowan asked. "Whose side are you on, Cale?" Cale hesitated, then bowed his head slightly toward Alara. "The side this kingdom forgot." They reached the old throne chamber, long unused, built over the ruins of the first crown hall. This was where the ancient pact had been sworn. Where the marked ones once stood before kings. Queen Mother Althea was already there, waiting. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this," she said softly. "But some endings demand witnesses." Outside, shouts grew louder. Steel clashed. The rebellion had begun. Althea turned to Alara. "The mark does not choose destruction," she said. "It reveals truth. The kingdom feared it because truth threatens power." Alara shook her head. "I don't want this. I never asked to be a symbol." "No," Althea replied gently. "You were chosen because you would never seek it." The pendant pulsed and suddenly the air shifted. The stone beneath their feet glowed faintly. Alara gasped as memories not her own flooded her mind. kings who ruled with cruelty, crowns taken by force, marked women and men who stood before them, not as weapons but as judgment. This place listens, Kale said. And it answers. The chamber doors burst open. Armed nobles rushed in, fear and fury etched across their faces. Step away from her, Your Highness, one shouted. This ends now. Rowan stepped forward. You are afraid, he said clearly. Not of her, but of what she exposes. Silence, another yelled, raising his blade. Before the strike could fall, Elara moved. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her hands. She simply stood still, the pendant lifting from her palm as if drawn by an unseen force. The birthmark flared with soft silver light, filling the chamber. The nobles froze, weapons slipping from their hands as the truth they buried pressed into their minds. Their deals. Their betrayals. The hunger for control. One by one they fell to their knees, overwhelmed not by pain but by knowing. It's over, Althea said. The guards loyal to Rowan arrived moments later, arresting the conspirators without resistance. The rebellion collapsed as quickly as it had begun. When the light faded, Elara swayed. Rowan caught her before she fell. It's done, he whispered. She looked up at him, exhausted. Is it? By morning the kingdom knew the truth. The nobles' plot was revealed. Rowan's claim to the throne was secured. The people waited, anxious and silent, for the fate of the marked girl. In the great hall, Rowan stood before the court. Elara stood beside him, her mark visible, no longer hidden. She is not cursed, Rowan declared. She is the reason this kingdom still stands. Murmurs filled the hall, but no one dared argue. Later, as the palace settled into uneasy calm, Elara prepared to leave. You don't need me anymore, she said. Rowan frowned. The people will want to see you. To understand. Elara smiled faintly. Understanding doesn't require a throne. As she turned to go, the pendant cracked softly in her hand, splitting clean in two. The light vanished. Althea watched, troubled. That shouldn't have happened. What does it mean? Rowan asked. Elara felt a strange peace settle over her. The mark didn't choose you, she said to Rowan. It chose the kingdom. As she stepped beyond the palace gates, unnoticed by most, the birthmark on her neck slowly began to fade. High above, unseen by all, another mark began to form on the skin of a newborn child in a distant province. And the story, it seemed, was not finished at all. The bells continued to ring as the people filled the streets, their voices rising into a restless hum. Torches flickered below the palace walls, not in anger this time but in uncertainty. Elara stood beside Prince Rowan, feeling the weight of thousands of lives pressing close, even from a distance. The birthmark on her neck no longer burned, but it felt warm, steady, like a heartbeat that wasn't her own. Queen Mother Althea joined them, her face calm but resolute. This is the moment, she said quietly. Not of power but of truth. Rowan nodded. He took Elara's hand, surprising her, and led her forward onto the balcony. The crowd fell silent when they appeared. Faces tilted upward, fear and hope tangled together. I know you are afraid, Rowan called out, his voice carrying across the square. You have been taught to fear signs, to fear stories, to fear what you don't understand. Tonight, that fear nearly destroyed us. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elara stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but she did not stop. I was called cursed before I could speak, she said. Before I could choose who I wanted to be. I have lived quietly, trying not to take up space. But silence did not save me. And it did not save you. She touched the birthmark lightly. This mark did not make me dangerous. Fear did. The crowd listened now. Truly listened. Rowan continued, the conspiracy against the crown was not born from prophecy, but from greed. Those responsible have been taken into custody. Their crimes will be judged openly. Guards led the captured nobles into view, their faces pale, stripped of authority. Gasps echoed as the truth became undeniable. For a long moment no one spoke. Then, slowly, someone lowered their torch. Another followed. The tension eased, not all at once, but enough. That night the city did not burn. It breathed. In the days that followed, change came quietly. Trials were held. Corrupt advisors were removed. Old laws rooted in superstition were questioned for the first time in generations. Rowan refused to rule from behind closed doors, and the people, wary but curious, began to engage. Elara remained in the palace for a while, not as a prisoner, not as a symbol, but as a witness. She answered questions honestly. She listened more than she spoke. Many came expecting magic. They left surprised by her humanity. One morning, Queen Mother Althea visited Alara's chamber. "The new child," she said softly. "The one born with the mark. She is safe. Her family has been protected." Alara felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. "So it continues." "Yes," Althea replied. "But perhaps differently now." The pendant, now cracked and dull, was placed in the palace archive, its purpose fulfilled. The birthmark on Alara's neck faded slowly over time, until only a faint shadow remained. Not gone entirely but no longer heavy. When the season turned, Alara made her choice. "I want to leave," she told Rowan one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. "Not because I'm running. Because I want to live a life that's mine." Rowan stopped. For a moment she thought he might argue. Instead he smiled, sad but proud. "You changed this kingdom," he said. "You don't owe it anything more." "And you?" Alara asked. "I'll spend my life trying to make sure no one else is called cursed for being different," Rowan replied. They parted at the palace gates at sunrise. No ceremony. No crowd. Just two people who had met at the wrong time and changed everything anyway. Alara traveled beyond Lyrian, through villages where no one knew her story. She worked, laughed, and learned who she was without fear following her shadow. Sometimes people noticed the faint mark and asked about it. She would smile and say, "It's just a reminder." Back in Lyrian, Prince Rowan ruled with care. The legends did not disappear, but they softened. Parents told their children new versions, ones where marks were questions, not curses. Where fear was something to be faced, not obeyed. Years later, in a distant province, a young girl with a moon-shaped birthmark stood at a window, listening to her mother tell her a story about a woman who was once feared and chose kindness anyway. The girl traced her own mark, curious, unafraid. And somewhere on a quiet road, Alara paused, feeling the sun on her face, the weight of the past finally light enough to carry. The kingdom moved forward. Not perfect, not healed completely, but awake. And that, perhaps, was the real ending to the curse.